Yeah.
All right. So I'm Sebastian, and I'll be chair for this round from Peru, and my panelists for this round will be
Alka from Lithuania.
Priyoka from Nepal.
great. Now, without further ado, I'd like to call the first speaker for the proposition.
The fight for equality begins as a fight to be yourself and not to be someone else, not to live in the shadow, but to be yourself as an individual. We think that's a defining feature that allows us to win this comparative. Our side is proud to support creating new characters that represent minority traits rather than trying to graft them onto a majority character to please and appeal the majority. We think that is a world that we will rather not support. Two arguments for the House today. Firstly, why we think the art will not be representative if you use recasting, why the counterfactual will be better on our side. Second of all, why the discourse that you produce is inherently counterproductive through recasting and why it will be better on our side. Before I move into that, some basic definitions. We define art and pop culture as generally entertainment that's created for either self-expression or sending a message. We think this oftentimes means mass media. We're talking about things all the way from movies to plays to all sorts of viewed art because we're talking purely about actors. Second of all, we're talking about creating new lead characters. We're talking about characters that fundamentally have more screen time, have more agency, that are protagonists, that forward the plot. When we're referring to minorities, we're talking about all sorts of minorities. Ethnic, sexual, or religious minorities, even women, etc. Those are the kinds of minorities that we're going to talk about in this debate. What is the difference between creation and recasting, to make this extremely clear? Creation is when you have a new storyline, when you have sometimes no existing families except for hype for your directors or your writers. When you're fundamentally centered around, oftentimes, the identity of your character, you're constructing them from scratch. Recasting is fundamentally one that comes with emotional baggage, something that comes with emotional ties, expectations, where oftentimes they are played originally by a majority character, and now you're simply changing the actors behind them. That is the difference between both of those. So, on to our first argument. Why do we think art itself will be more representative? Before I move to that, yes.
Why should the majority of famous characters so far stay the dominant majority?
We think them staying the majority is fine. We think introducing a new host and diversity and diaspora for everybody to have somebody to look up to is a better world than the one they're suggesting. Before that, 2 yardsticks for this debate. Firstly, we think the main goal is also to have minorities feel that they're represented and feel that they're empowered. Secondly, that majorities are also changing their minds and optics. This is specific goals of specific groups of people. In terms of the LGBT community, it's about normalization. In terms of ethnic groups, it's about stereotypes being changed. Overall, the long-term goal is to create equal treatment. We think we achieve that better on our side of the house. First argument. Why do we think the art will be better on our side? We think fundamentally the issue with recasting comes in 3 lenses, because there's constantly an onslaught of pressure to make sure you balance the representation on either side. And we think the studio producers aren't great at deciding how we are going to write a character. So maybe 3 major ideas of how the character turns out. 1, they either come out as hollow and superficial stereotypes, and the kinds that are just simply grafted upon, you just change the actor and the character fundamentally remains the same. Why do we think this is the case? Because it often is very easy and expedient for studios to use virtue signaling as a feature of attracting more audiences. They think in their minds of the corporate boards and look, as long as you have a black actor in a white role, it's fine. We can mix and match the best of both markets. This is the kind of lazy advertising we see in certain kinds of movies, right? If we go to, for example, Ghostbusters, they try to engage the feminist agenda, but the most they get through touching this is by inverting stereotypes by having Chris Hemsworth just act more feminine. Meaning that in and of itself isn't sufficient as a representative of feminist movement as it's large. What it is simply just changing 1 or 2 characteristics and calling it a day. That's the kind of thing we don't support because the real messages are lost. Second of all, right, the kinds of production that try and balance identities and why this creates an issue. Because fundamentally, some characters just cannot be changed. Some characters have characteristics that are just simply attached to the previous identity of the majority that they hold. What does this mean? It means, for example, if you try to make Superman, for example, just be black, and just change that entirely, it doesn't function. Why? Because the characteristic experience of, like, for example, black people, about police brutality, etc., are directly antithetical to the rest of things that a policeman, to the rest of things that Superman is, right? He's fundamentally impervious to damage. He doesn't have to care about what other people think about him. He's fundamentally working with police all the time. He doesn't have to stand up against any form of repression. The fact that these characters intrinsically exist in a way that empowers them directly because they came from majority classes sometimes means they're just unable to be connected or changed in terms of racial characteristics, right? Really, that's the kind of thing that you don't have. Or another example still, for example, imposing an LGBT character on one that was originally straight, adding in new scenes that don't actually apply, or adding in lines of dialogue that sometimes might be, for example, offensive and don't actually have any, might be offensive. I mean, that's the kind of harm that you have. Thirdly, the kinds of studios that become super sensitive and try to essentially rewrite the character by adding too many characteristics. But in this case, what you basically do is have a caricature. What you do is reduce the original character into one that's just very close to the ethnic minority. As a result, what you essentially have is one that just accentuates all their stereotypes to best make it possible and show that we have actually considered this so much. What this means is you lose the actual character, what this means is you lose that academic that they have. What do we have on the counterfactual? We have a better world because fundamentally we have one where you create new characters, where their identity and their expression can be integrated as one, right? Where they no longer have to deal with this balancing act of which character fits what role. What does this mean? It means that we have characters that explore nuance, people that actually explore stories that are individual experiences. And we like to show that empirically these things are more resonant within minority communities, right? Look at the popularity of films like Moonlight. Fundamentally, when you create new characters, or Black Panther, but when fundamentally you create new characters that resonate with people's own struggles, rather than trying to integrate struggles into a storyline that doesn't match, I mean, that's the one that reaches out to more people and is better about. Second of all, you create a structural incentive, where producers are forced to, for example, create new characters that just simply think about it more, right? But they appeal to niche markets, but they don't have to balance the incentives of both things across the board. You have a better incentive to create better characters. That's what we have. And let's just do some simple weighing, right? The probability with the balance is if we see a world where more producers try to balance the act versus more producers try to create new characters, what do we have? You have a probability that you mess up and you mess up badly in all three scenarios, or you have our world where you try and sometimes your movies don't take off, but when they do, they're so much more empowering, they're so much more meaningful. That's the way we have today in this debate. That's why we think we're so much stronger. What are the impacts if their movies got wrong? It means you have stereotypes. It means you disempower social justice movements because you picture these minorities in positions of power. It makes it seem like their struggles are no longer relevant because look, they're already powerful, meaning you don't have any sort of benefit in that way. Second argument, why do you worsen discourse and why is it counterproductive? Understand the basic message that you're sending when you basically have a minority put into the role of a majority, right? It means that they always have to live in the shadow. It means that this person could be James Bond. He could be just like him. It means you will constantly live in the shadow perceptually. Instead of being an individual, you're just one of them. You could be like them. I mean, that's the kind of harm that you have, is that you're not trying to show that you just can be them, but you can be yourself, and their individual traits do matter. We think when you're trying to force somebody into a mold, you only reduce their individual characteristics into something that's palatable. We think that is disgusting. Second of all, right, we think you also create preemptive firestorms, right? When you have issues of reverse incentives, when you have voices that are prejudiced because of their emotional ties to the original character, meaning that they say things like, I'm not racist, but I disagree this character be portrayed in this way. Why is this an issue? Because when studios make compromises, either they do the character and make them bland, which is worse. Second of all, when the minorities themselves speak out against a representation and they want more, it means that producers can sometimes give cheap responses, right? Give the example of Iron Fist, where there was a Asian community strive to try and change a character to an Asian. The producers couldn't. What they did is just quickly say, oh, now add this random Asian character and create him and try to like model all the stereotypes as well. I mean, that's worse off for your side of the house because what you have, therefore, is perverse incentives for these kinds of producers, right? Because they're reactionary and rush. Fundamentally, what you have is a situation where you disempower the minority, where they don't have the capacity to actually express themselves, where they constantly live in the shadows. For all of those reasons, we are so proud to oppose.
Now I call the first speaker for the opposition.
carefully to the rhetoric of Proposition 1. Don't put minority characters in roles that originally existed because they need spaces of their own. It's important that minority characters only live out roles that are about their minority experiences. We tell you that Proposition advocates for separate spaces for minorities to exist within Hollywood. We would tell you separate is never equal, incredibly proud to oppose. In this speech, a couple of things. First, a few notes on framing, and then substantial rebuttal of opposition, and then I'll chat about our first two substantive arguments. First on industries, and second on the audience. But first, let's answer a couple of things on framing. We agree with Proposition broadly that the heart of this motion is about enabling the advancement for people who are currently and have been shut out of mainstream media. But crucially, we think this motion operates in a slightly different lens. Both types of minority roles exist on both sides of the house. That is to say, yes, you have some characters that are only lead roles, and yes, you have some characters that are recast. The question of this debate is which roles are better for the advancement of minorities at large. We will be providing you very clear arguments there. The next thing I'd just like to note on framing is that this motion, to provide some context, comes out of the trend of remakes happening all the time. Things like It, Ghostbusters, and literally all of the Disney movies are currently being remade, showing you that there's a constant demand for these remakes. We think minorities in this instance are very likely to fill these roles. With that being said, let's look at opposition's material. Now, the first and second argument we're going to answer together because they are basically two sides of the same coin, telling you that they don't want minorities to be overshadowed and that minorities shouldn't have to exist within roles that are in remaking. A couple of really big problems with this. First, listen to the language that they bring you about the characterization of these roles. They tell you that you lose the active characters whenever black people are put in white people roles. They tell you things like scenes of gayness do not apply to the character in a remade film. We fundamentally reject this characterization. We tell you that whenever minorities are recast in these roles, they actually bring something to the table, that it is not bad for a minority to be in these roles, and that it does not violate the intrinsic aspects of this depth. We reject their language and characterization to begin with. The second thing that we would tell you is that you can use their own warrants against them as to why you're more likely to get tokenization. They tell you that studio directors cannot write for people of color. Note that on the comparative level, their side is so much worse. Why is this the case? Because studios are about cash. That means that insofar as the hegemonic majority already maintains a stranglehold on what people want to consume in media, it's more likely that you're just going to get white characters in rom-com than you ever will people of color if that's all it is. That means the only way to make cash is if your movie is about the minority experiences of that individual. That's so harmful because they themselves tell you that studio directors cannot direct for people of color. We would tell you on our side of the house that those characters already have the depth because they were made so in the first place with things like in their original ones. The next thing that we would just like to say is combating their characterization that, it's important that people have representation in these things and that whenever you're recasting a remake that you don't actually have representation for your people. I would tell you that me as an Asian American, I'm more than simply the fact that I'm Asian. I can do normal things, right? We don't think it's bad for there to be minorities in movies doing normal things. With that being said, let's look at our first substantive argument about improving industries. Two ways that you increase the number of people of color under our side of the house. First, movie studios have internal implicit quotas for who they're willing to create movies about. Note this clashes directly with their first substantive argument because it shows you why. Even if tokenization is less bad on their side of the house, you're not going to get as many movies about people of color. Movie studios like Paramount, Pixar, A24, all of them have to have internal implicit quotas about what they're going to support and what they want to show people. We need this mean things crucially, like there will never going to be 2 Mulans in the same year because, hey, one is enough, right? We already got this tale out about Asian representation. No need to have more stories about the same minority experience. We would tell you on our side of the house, you could have 2 movies with 2 black female leads that are different in storyline and capabilities and things of that nature because they fundamentally tell different tales. On their side of the house, because they wanted to be about this single story of one person living throughout their minority experience, they have to have that same story told twice because they themselves tell you it has to be more simple. The second way that you improve industries is by decreasing the barrier to entry for making these films. Note that the creation of a new movie is easier on our side of the house because movie studios still want to make remakes right now. They know that they're probably running out of ideas, which is why you see this huge trend towards making remakes in the status quo. In that instance, we think it's entirely likely that because they do not want it to be the exact same as the original, that they're going to cast people of color in their main roles. Additionally, because they know that they have to appeal to a wide audience, so it's better to have people cast in this. Why does this argument matter in this round? Because we show you that we increase the number of movies being made. So even if the type of representation you get on both sides of the house is qualitatively equal, you have to default to our side because we show you that you get more representation for these individuals. Our second substantive argument is going to be about improving the audience internalization. Note that the most important thing is telling the narrative that not all ethnic majority or heteronormative stereotypes about whether or not you're male should be what's considered as regular. We do not believe that movies that are telling stories about everyday life, like rom-coms and things of that nature, should only tell the stories of white individuals. And we think that the most famous films, the ones that are the most iconic, are always reflective of this majority. For example, The Sound of Music is one of the most famous films of all times, and it is completely indicative of this. We think that with the idea of remakes, these new characters already have three-dimensional developments embedded within their storyline. That's why they were so famous to be remade in the beginning, because they already have that depth of analysis and character. We think that beyond their minority status, it's going to be beneficial. Because before I move on to this, I'll take your point.
The point at which that character depth doesn't reflect the actual experiences minority people have in real life, what use do you give to those people?
That's completely a lie, right? I, as a minority, experienced some of the same things that white people also experience. I also experienced love and loss. These things are communicated in movies. I do not, as a minority, only have to be in movies about how I'm impressed. That's ridiculous. Moving on, we would tell you that being a minority in a recast in a film makes your life beyond minority status. This directly responds to the POI we just get. Because you don't always have to have representation in your culture, because you have that as an individual growing up in a minority culture. For example, Indian kids grow up to the tales of Krishna. Vietnamese children grow up to the tales of the Chung sisters. We think that these are the things that happen, where you see icons in your life. And it's important to say that there is no real reason that Captain America needed to be white. That person could have been a person of color. That's something you get on our side of the house, where individuals are able to live real lives. But additionally, we think that you're going to benefit the audience perception whenever you have things like people of color recast in these roles. Why is this the case? Because remakes happen on two fronts. Either first is people who are growing up and seeing these remakes on the first time. We think it's better for that because they see the normalization, internalization that these people can just be regular people. The second thing is that older people are going to want to see the new movie. So even if you do get some backlash on their side of the house, which they say is going to happen, we say it's a good thing. It's good to force yourself to confront the racism that you endure. Why do you think it's okay for Ariel just to only be white? We think these are good things to confront because it increases the amount of discourse. Look, at the end of the day, this debate is extremely clear. We tell you minorities do not have to only fit in with the box of being minorities. Separate is never equal. Very proud to oppose.
Now I call the second speaker for the proposition.
Okay, just to preempt what's going to be a pretty messy debate, I'm just going to give you 3 flashes, just clarify what they have to stand for implicitly. I'm going to give you an extension about individual actors, because if that's all they care about, like the arithmetic number of actors that get into power, we show you why we benefit those stakeholders far more. The first clash then, on the level of depth, I just don't think the response was adequate to the nuance that Byrne gave you. What were the responses they had? oh, like one, these characters are inherently complex. They like explore, like they contain depth within them that was why they were popular in the first place, and this still helps minorities because minorities feel things like love as well, like they feel common experiences. Here's the issue. They never told us why those sorts of experiences were exclusive, right? That's to say, Black Panther, our original black character, also experiences things that are universal, like struggles with loyalty. The one thing that we achieve exclusively is the unique nuances of his identity that you get from having a character that's explicitly surrounded around that identity and those traits. They never told us why that was a trade-off that was even necessary in this debate. So at a point where they say the only thing we get is humanization because of common tropes, we think that we get that a lot more on our side of the house. The second thing, that these minorities, like these characters are always going to be reduced to stereotypes on our side of the house because of like mechanisms that they never fully explain. Again, the reason why this argument doesn't stand is because we already gave you some analysis as to why this is probably more true on their side of the house, right? That is to say, when companies have to engage in virtue signaling, the fact that there's a character already implicit, that you're grafting a like external appearance onto a character means that like you weren't considering the way in which an actual individual with that minority identity would have acted within those circumstances in the first place, because there's the existing character that we're trying to graft characteristics onto. At a point where you make that that characterization more about the identity experience, that means because you weren't even considering that in the first place, you resort to tired stereotypes, you resort to tropes. Like, compare that with our counter model, in which we suggested that producers probably have more of an active need to think about the way minority characters exist within these roles, the ways that they, the kinds of experiences a character like this would have if they were of like a minority identity and they had to start from scratch. That means that you can't resort on the sort of thing they talk on you. Make no mistake, panel, it's probably true that stereotypes happen a lot more on their side of the house. But finally, under this crash, the cheapest idea, that people can be more than their identity. Sure, this is necessarily true, but your identity influences the way in which you live life, right? It influences the experiences you have and the kinds of choices you're even able to make and the ways that people interact with you. The problem with using an existing character is that all these traits have already been predetermined. A plot has been written, the end result of where this character is going to go has already been determined. At the point where you just simply graft on a minority identity, inherently that means that you get a lot less genuine reflection of how minorities live their lives. So at that point, you get just far less accurate and disingenuous representation of how this works. What does this mean? They ignored my founder's entire half of the case, right? This idea about discourse and why perception gets so much worse. No, thank you. I'll take a POI after rebuttal, right? At a point where it's simply like people can simply say it is the same character but with just a different color. That's where you get empower people to say I am not racist, but like they're encroaching upon our cultural stereotypes, right? That's where you get this sort of outrage and reaction that really like disempowers the ability to get minority characters on stage. But a second idea, right? That means that these characters are going to be just a lot worse. They're going to have less of the nuance they talk about. That was a trade-off that they had to deal with. The second idea, this idea of prominence, and I think it's really strange debate math. They simply said we increased the number of like minority actors objectively, and that means that we win somehow. One, we simply think that's not true, right? We told you about the balancing act that studios often have to engage in, right? At a point where you constantly have to balance the like existing preconceptions people have with the idea of minority. We suggested if that effort was focused on creating original characters, you'd probably get a lot more efficacy. But two, even if you don't believe that, I don't think it's as much of a dichotomy that you talked about. This isn't just about movies, right? It's the fact that original characters can also be introduced to things like TV shows that have a unique identity instead of relying on tired tropes and existing characters. That's something that I have contend with. But finally, even if they arithmetically get more people, at a point where all those depictions are a lot cheaper and don't reflect the kinds of experiences people have, because you're inherently relying on the character that was designed for a majority identity, and you don't get the nuances and reality of the experiences that people face, we don't see why arithmetically more like representations does anything for these people. Arguably, it reinforces the stereotypes and makes perception of them so much worse and so much less useful. No, thank you. The third idea, this idea of role models, right? Probably is like the legitimate sort of arguments they should have run. One, I think it's just like a lot better on our side of the house, right? That's to say, when you look at movies like Us, characters are originally created centered around these identities made by minority producers, which are much more likely to engage in this sort of behavior instead of large studios trying to co-opt minority identities for majority characters. Look at what happened, right? That's to say, you got like things like a sense of collective ownership around these people, because these are things that are unique to that identity and unique to that community in the first place. That's why why you got things like students of famous historically black universities in the United States engaging in traditional Southern gospel before they watched the movie for the first time. Because it's such an uplifting experience, right? Because it's something that they actually own instead of something being provided to them, studios trying to capitalize on the existing character that was owned by the majority in the first place. That's a unique kind of role modelship for minority people that they inherently cannot replicate. We think that's so much more powerful. Before I continue short.
The analysis you think we're missing is in your first substantive. Bad writers, corrupt studios, and shallow representation all would be amplified when you're trying to create the stories yourselves, which is what's more likely.
Look, when you have an existing character and existing preconceptions to work with, by nature you're going to engage in less effort to make that depiction likely. You're less likely to do things like include minority people on your writing board as we've got in movies like Us, because there is simply no necessity. You can't change so much about a character because inherently the more you change, the more they shift towards our side of the house. And given that those characteristics already exist, that means that you are able to do a lot less. We think that POI, I'm not sure where they're getting out of that. I think that characterization mechanism is just a lot worse on outside the house. My extension then, about how actors on outside the house find it far easier to gain prominence, that we give benefits to these individuals. Notice this about the kinds of movies and kinds of art that we're willing to support. That one, the story revolves around the individual character and far more uniquely reflects their traits. That is to say, given that this character is created with the explicit intention of representing a minority and the actual experiences that they face, actors simply have more material to work with, right? The kind of unique experiences that you're never going to get with Ariel. And so you think on the first level, the acting is just going to be a lot better and a lot more nuanced. The same idea. The plot is centered around the kinds of experiences these average members of these community actually face. Things like Moonlight, right? When you have an entire movie surrounding about the trials that LGBT teenagers face within the United States. That's a unique kind of plotline that you don't get with characters that are retrofitted for a majority inherently, right? So the character is uniquely designed around them. What does it mean? We think that it means that you get the sense of collective ownership surrounding these actors that we talked about. And this means that they're able to do things they're far more able to talk out about their minority experiences, right? They're able to integrate unique plot lines that are specifically focused around these minority identities and bring in their own personal experience when they go out on things like talk shows. But the second thing, that they're far more likely to be successful in this capacity and find other roles. What is the commandment that they have to deal with? That the story isn't centered around the actors that they choose in order to fill these majority roles. That they're always going to get drowned out by the ritual that we talked about. That's never going to be about the artwork and ability of the actor itself, but whether the act of recasting was just in and of itself. We think that distraction from the actor and the ability to engage in artistic success is so harmful. But even when it is successful, we think you get things like relying on a handful of existing actors. It's always going to be Will Smith, for instance, instead of focusing on other actors that are struggling right now that could potentially fill the role better. We think that's a unique harm. They misunderstood this debate. They haven't engaged with the harms. I'm more than happy to propose.
Now I call the second speaker for the opposition.
Proposition has successfully talked themselves in a circle. If it is true that there are all these white, racist executive leaders of boards like Paramount, why then are the harms not parallel on both sides of the house? How then are they getting all of this nuance? How then are they how then are they creating new screenwriting which is somehow more nuanced if it is true that these boards are so racist? We think side proposition has fundamentally mischaracterized this debate. in my speech 3 things. First, I'll directly respond to their third substantive argument before asking the 2 nexus questions of this debate. What's better for minority representation, and what's better for the discourse to promote minority representation, before our third substantive argument on the benefits to actors directly clashing with their third. So their third substantive argument is basically that now it is easier for minority actors to gain prominence. 3 responses here. First, we think this has created internal noise. They say here that starting from scratch is good, but prior in the Proposition 1, they said that starting from scratch is bad because you have racist executive leaders. Secondly, in terms of prominence, we think it is far better for a minority actor to be in an iconic movie where there's a broader appeal base because it is obviously more prominent. It is literally iconic.
Points.
Thirdly, this argument is contingent on the fact that it creates more nuance. I'll deal with that more later. First question then is, which side is better for minority representation? In Proposition 2, they give you this one-off argument about how it creates more role models. We don't understand why a black Ariel can't be a sufficient role model for a little black girl either. We think that doesn't stand. Then they say it creates hollow and superficial stereotypes. This is their first warrant. We have 2 responses. First, the harms are parallel. What about a minority-led movie isn't also virtue signaling? Secondly, use your example against them. Strong female leads in Ghostbusters with a feminine man is good for exposure. It shatters the notion that everyone expects things to be male. Sure, it didn't explain dense feminist theory, but we don't think that's going to happen on your side of the house either. Rather, it exposes people to the fact that big buff Chris Hemsworth might be able to be a little bit feminine. Secondly, they said that some characters just can't be changed. 3 responses. First, that seems a little problematic to me to say that it's too hard to make Superman black. Secondly, take them on their best ground and take the Superman example. Okay, maybe now the Superman movie has Superman fighting against the police to protect black people. We think that you can change the narrative to actively make Superman good. Thirdly, the reason that they say Superman is invincible is what little black boys want to see. They want to know that they too can be invincible. They want to be Superman. They don't want their own segregated version of the movie. Black boys want to be Superman too. Why can't they be Superman? Then they say it leads to more nuance. This ignores us framing that the question of this debate isn't which movie exists. Like Moonlight still exists on our side of the house. The best iteration of this argument is more that people want to see their culture promoted. So I'll respond to that argument. We say people see their own community culture all the time within their communities. The question of the debate then is, where does the whole in representation lie? We say the whole in representation lies on seeing yourself in average people, in average roles. The fact that a gay boy and a lesbian girl want to be a mermaid and a merman too. That just isn't linked to race. The last argument they give you is that the balancing act is bad, but that's remarkably uncomparative. They have a balancing act on their side of the house too. Like, I don't understand why Paramount doesn't also have to appeal to their white viewer base for Black Panther 2. That feeds Un's argumentation about tokenization because they still have to appeal to the white voter base, meaning their best case scenario of Black Panther, if anything, gets whitewashed in order to make it profitable for everyone. Or in their worst case scenario, they don't tokenize it and only black people see it, so they don't actually advance any forms of representation because white people do not go see it. On that point, what was the response to our material? They just said their mechanisms were never fully explained. I mean, come on, give Un some more credit. She gave you 2 mechanisms. She said first, there are internal quotas, meaning there are just frankly fewer movies. She said secondly, that there's a decreased barrier of entry because right now there are lots of remakes. I mean, Pixar's next 10 movies are all like Toy Story 5 and 6. Pixar is making remakes in the status quo. Second question of this debate then becomes, which side is better for promoting discourse? They just say, well, it means they have to live in the shadow. They could be like James Bond. 2 responses. First, it's not they could be like James Bond, they become James Bond on our side of the house. On their side, they only live in the shadow. They're only on the side with the remake does this happen. Secondly, we tell you this backlash is good. Why? Because instead of a racist person just seeing Black Panther and saying, oh, that's the black movie, I'm not going to see it, the racist person now sees they want to go see Little Mermaid, but it's a black Little Mermaid. You at the very least expose the fact that they're racist, And at best, you force people to have a conversation with them to talk about why it's good to have a black Ariel. What did we hear in response to our material that minorities should be doing things more regular? They said identity influences the way you live your life. Exactly. The way identity influences your life is that you never see yourself as normal when you never see those roles. Moreover, we think remaking iconic movies is the most important impact in this debate because they are in themselves iconic. They are part of this, I'll take you in a minute, they are part of the social fabric, meaning even if they get things like Moonlight, we think it's better to have black people in iconic movies because then people feel that they are part of the social fabric and not separated in niche movies like Moonlight. Before I move on to my third sub, I'll take a
At the point where your only benefits are role models, subversion, and prominence, you achieve nothing that is unique to recasting. What makes that actively and specifically better than the prominent original movies we were talking about?
That's a funny question. You said our only benefits and then listed 3 for me, but I can give you some more if you want them. We would say at the point in which now minorities see themselves in regular roles as opposed to only having movies about the fact that they are a minority, about the fact that it's about their minority culture, at that point we'll add a 4th thing to your list of 3 for me. Our third substantive argument is on benefits to actors. 2 layers. The first is on a reparative principle. Many old movies are actively exploiting minority culture. This looks like The Lion King being voiced by white actors. Robin Williams is the genie in Aladdin, Emma Stone playing an Asian woman, or Nick Robinson playing a gay boy in Love, Simon. People extracted value from minority culture without that value going back to the actual minorities. The only way to fix this is to remake movies and cast them with minorities in those new roles. We think this looks like the new Lion King movie, which is primarily made up of both black and gay actors. Proposition never fills the vast moral void left behind by these movies which extracted value from minorities. At best, they just create new value. The second layer is decreasing tokenization and stereotypes. In a world of minority-specific movies, tokenization always occurs because the people who own these big production companies are white and powerful, meaning it's more offensive. It leads to typecasting. In order to appeal to the wider and whiter audience, they have to create more shallow cultural descriptions. And to all the boys I've loved before, although there's a Korean protagonist, the extent of cultural appreciation is having the main character like cute food and yogurt. At that point, we think you should vote for opposition. Very proud of those.
Now I call the third speaker for proposition.
Team opposition thinks that black boys can be Superman. But what's better? Being Superman, who is a black character, but who is dismissed as a cheap ripoff of the original character who is better and cooler anyways, or aspiring to be Black Panther, because not only looks the same as you, but also has a movie which has cultural references that remind you of your decor at home, which remind you of the settings of your own home life. We think it's not true that these positive influences can only come from iconic remake movies. We think that's only worse. 4 main ideas for the house today. First of all, on exposure, whether it actually matters. Second of all, on the quality of portrayal of movies. Third of all, on whether remakes are really so iconic and important. And finally, on which side better benefits actors. So first of all, on exposure, right? So this was the goal that they locked onto in the beginning of 01. We're not clear why they put this front and center, because this isn't something that intrinsically comes with a remake. It's something that can happen on both sides of the house, so they had to do a lot of gymnastics to prove that their exposure is far greater on their side. Actually, go for it.
Our mechanism was that remakes are of iconic characters. Superman is widely known, which means when that gets significantly more exposure than maybe an indie remake that doesn't get, indie original that doesn't get as much exposure.
So let me just deal with the remakes idea first, but backlash first, right? Like, okay, indie remakes, we think that they're just trying to push us into defending something that's not true. Black Panther, Love, Simon, all of these movies that recently started to produce that have gained so much popularity and so much viewership. Like, this is the trend that's happening in status quo, not, oh, now suddenly people are starting to make remakes. They've been making remakes for ages. Like, that's how you get money, because people are going to go see the movie because it's like a cheap remake, but we don't think that this is so important at all, right? But the second idea they gave us is that, oh wow, these movies are part of the social fabric, and therefore Black people and ethnic minorities should be represented in it. We should acknowledge that at the time that this movie was produced, people have taken a back seat, and we should try and move forward and add new iconic and well-developed movies to the tapestry of different movies that contribute to the social awareness. But finally, we told you quite clearly that it's far worse when you remake movies because people already have an existing emotional attachment to those characters, to the plot. And when you shift it, as they think that they want to shift it, like dramatically shift the plotline such that Superman is not like saving one lane, he's like fighting policemen, we think that they only get more aggressive and angry because they see it not only as an addition, but rather as an invasion of something that they hold to be very dear to their hearts. We think that remaking iconic movies is actually counterproductive. So back to exposure, right? They told you, first of all, the idea that you get more representation, like quantitatively. Why is this not true? First of all, because they tell us that there will be quantitatively more storylines because now we have 2 Black female leads. Like, first of all, like debate math aside, we just don't think that many movie studios will have an incentive to take a major iconic movie, take out the 2 main characters, and replace them with Black women. We think that there's a far bigger incentive on these movie studios who are putting these minorities into the positions because they want the money that comes with virtue signaling to put them in as side characters or as supporting characters, replace the cheaper and more expendable characters that people don't have such a strong emotional attachment to. But second of all, they told us that, well, you can get more money from like making remakes, and therefore there are going to be more of it, right? Well, I told you already quite clearly that the trend of remakes is really like secondary to the trend of people developing famous movies such as Crazy Rich Asians, such as Love, Simon. We think that that's the trend that we ought to support instead. But crucially, we think that their entire argument of exposure is just less important than what we brought to the table, right? Because they didn't really give us a reason why there's intrinsic benefits to seeing quantitatively more people of your ethnicity on the screen. We think that it's counterproductive when the representation is worse, when it propagates stereotypes or cheap misrepresentations, and we think it's also worse when the discourse surrounding the movie is also more toxic and more poisonous. We think that we're going to prove that going by our yardsticks of improving lives of minorities and changing the lives of majorities, we win. So what was their idea on majorities, right? They said, at least on our side, you force these people to go to the theater, watch the movie, and then talk about it, and then their minds will be changed. Why is this just not true, right? Because the first reason is we think that they have just got this key stakeholder here completely wrong. The abhorrent racists who are going to say, oh, there's a Black character in Black Panther, I would show up and watch that movie, is certainly not going to go to a Black Ariel remake and go, this is something that I want to watch in my spare time. And they're far less likely to say, having watched this movie, my life is changed. But second of all, we just don't think that a remake of a beloved movie, which is And you already have original, right? So if you really want to watch it, you stay at home, you watch the original, and you stay clear of what Rotten Tomatoes and other people on Reddit are telling you are a bastardization of a film that you really like. You often instead boycott the movie because you're so patriotically against it. So having one idea on exposure, let me go into the idea on portrayal and the quality of this. So Byrne spent 6 thick minutes on this in his P1 about how you get worse stereotypes, you get worse misrepresentation when you have all the baggage of an original movie attached to a remake. They try to strawman us into saying that, well, actually movies aren't all about your experience of oppression and like rhetoric about how she's an Asian American, right? But like 3 things. First of all, you're a minority. You have slightly different experiences, but you're not an alien on a different planet. Rather, the difference is they're categorically like elements of your life which are different from that of a majority. You might be more careful when you're out on the street at night, you might be more wary of the police person, you might just frequent different areas of town or face more barriers when applying for certain job or educational positions. All of these are important things to convey about the minority experience, because to gloss over them would be to give the majority a false sense of security and a false sense of idealization, but we think that you can't achieve this when you remake the movie without sacrificing big parts of the plot and therefore alienating viewers. So the second response to this was they tried to co-opt all of our analysis by saying, well, these same studios are like the same, but they just have bad incentives, and it's going to be worse if you're trying to produce a wholly original movie, right? Like, we just don't think that's very nuanced at all, because it's not the exact same studio, right? We think often Marvel Studios is categorically different from another, like, smaller studio which is producing a movie focused on the minority experience, and therefore it's going to have the incentive to bring in character design experts or bring in actors who have a very close connection to that character, as opposed to just grabbing a big name, famous actor and going, okay, you're black, people know your name, here, participate in a remake, it will get us more views. We think, second of all, the approach to the movie is completely different when you have baggage as opposed to when you don't. Because when you're trying to balance this new movie with the legacy of the previous one, you're trying to stay true to the previous movie and therefore not alienate local fan base. But you also want to still get some brownie points for the minority character in your film, right? But then all of this means they just get a far messier, far worse movie. You either misrepresent the minority or you alienate the majority and make them frustrated and angry. I think all of these are bad outcomes. On Ours in the House, however, you have the incentive most of the time to have nuance, because you want to pitch your movie as being profound, as being interesting. You want those good reviews, right? Like, hence we have these deep movies such as Moonlight being pumped out. But second of all, at a worst case scenario, at least we have a genuine and sensical, like smoothly flowing plotline that doesn't make people go, this is a movie with a black person in it and it happens to be terrible. Therefore, social justice is corrupting pop culture. Therefore, I'm against this movement in general. So we think that all of these reasons that we get worse. Like, we got 2 more responses to the third, right? They told us we can dramatically shift the plotline, but these movie studios often don't have the incentive to do so because it's unnecessary, because they think that they just want to go on their existing fan base. And second of all, they gave us the idea of whitewashing. Like, surely whitewashing is something that you do more when you're pitching a movie that's iconic and aimed at the general population, as opposed to when you're trying to keep your minority fan base. For these reasons, go to your proposition. Thanks.
Now for third speaker for the opposition.
Growing up in an Indian household, I was saturated with Indian culture. From the day I could understand, my parents told me stories about Krishna, Ram, Lakshman, Akbar, and Birbal. Every race is already saturated with that culture. Every race already has stories that are about that culture. But my parents would characterize me as an ABCD, an American-born, confused Desi. I may happen to be Indian, but I'm not really attached to Indian culture. I like cursing. I like loud American music, and please do not tell my parents this, but I like chicken. What did I look up to when I was a kid? I looked up to Captain America. I looked up to Iron Man, and I looked up to my favorite Disney characters. Those were my cultural icons. But later I noticed that they were all white. But those were the ones that was most important to me. I couldn't relate to Ram and Krishna even though they were my original new story brown characters. But I did relate to the superheroes I saw, the detectives I saw, the people I saw on the screen, but they were all white. Why couldn't they be brown? What about being me made it so much different that my culture could not be reflected if the same story arc of Captain America, he just happened to be Indian? What about my culture could not be reflected if the characters that I looked up to as a little child could not look like me? What Proposition wanted to bring me was a character that talked all about being Indian in America, maybe dealt with the interesting race question of how we were painted post-September 11th. 5-year-old me wouldn't understand. 5-year-old me just wanted to see my superheroes look like me. That is the biggest impact in this debate. That is what side opposition stands for. It is because that these remakes are about cultural heroes that are already ingrained within society that they need to be diverse. In this speech, I will break down the content of this debate underneath two themes. The first theme is what is better representation. The first mechanism under this is the need for normalcy. The crucial question is that every culture already has cultural stories. Every culture already has representation. But the point is, in the status quo, all of the dominant tropes, just being a regular person, means you're default white in America, or default male. That needs to change. What needs to change is the regular people, the culturally entrenched icons. The reason this is the biggest impact in the round is because it's the clearest mechanism to gain the most representation. These characters are already famous. There can be a 10, 20, 100 steps for a new small film to gain the icon level to give kids a new character. But what you want to give kids is the famous heroes that they already know are famous look like them. You want that representation to be there because that clear, unique mechanism is already there. It's significantly easier to show African American children that they can be superheroes too by taking Superman and making him look like they look. They're taking Disney movies and making them look like they look. It is not necessary to invest in the theory. It's not necessary to invest in little, small, original movies, or even big picture original movies that are about heavy issues.
Sir.
What people want to see on the big screen is not the racial reality of their daily lives, the example that their Prop 3 brings you of knowing that you have to walk a little more carefully on the street. I don't want to see that on the big screen though. I just want to see people look like me that act normal, that act regularly. The plot line has this direct incentive on their side of the house to make it about being a minority, to be the worst form of shallow representation. Because do not forget their first substantive argument. It was all about the mechanisms by which making these original new stories would allow for the culture of minorities to be represented. The story I told you at the top proves that race doesn't automatically equal culture. My culture is not homogenous to the most recent Indian new original character that they had in the Jungle Book. My culture is homogenous to what I saw as a kid. That's what I like. I'm just a normal American, and normal Americans on the big screen should be brown, which is why the remakes are particularly necessary. But what does Proposition bring you? They say that it'll be cheap. We're willing to risk a little bit of cheapness and a little bit of shallowness for the importance of this normalcy. They say it needs to be new. The opposition is the best middle ground because it takes characters that are already culturally entrenched and adds a different shade to them and adds a different nuance to them that could include some level of understanding of how that culture could differently affect them, but it doesn't make everything about being a homogenous culture. Before I go on to the crucial impact of this argument, I'll take your point.
As a studio like Marvel who crafts the representation of the future icons of children, do you repeat past heroes and change their skin color, or do you create new ones for the children to adore?
Okay, so this is interesting because this gets into more of the practical mechanisms which I'm about to go over. What is Marvel most likely to do? Marvel is about to remake a bunch of films. Marvel already has a set number of characters. Those characters are already entrenched in society. My heroes growing up were the white characters of Marvel. I needed them to look like me instead of waiting for Marvel to come around and make a new individual character for me. Also, I don't trust the studio execs of Marvel to give a new Indian character a good storyline. I don't want my new Indian superhero eating curry. I just wanted the Indians, the people I looked up to, the culture that I have, the person I am, to just be reflected on the screen. Just the whole point is that being different, not being a majority ethnicity, should be normalized within society, which is why remakes are a necessary key. Let's touch on quickly about why their mechanisms for why our characters are shallow also apply to them. This is something I don't think they've quite dealt with in this debate yet, because their one give you a certain number of mechanisms, like the fact that writers are bad, that studio execs have a profit incentive. Then, look at who they're trusting to write the stories for their new minority characters. Those same studio executives, those same writers. Are they really going to give you an excellent story about like minority representation? But let's say you have like original black writers, original brown writers, original women, like female writers. Those writers are significantly less likely to get the same impact that cultural icons already have on society because they're already entrenched. It's significantly less likely for them to make the new blockbuster, to make the new icon that kids look up to, which is why remakes are just much, much more better. They have also not answered our entire third substantive argument about how this return to normalcy is a necessary reparative purpose, because for so long, these characters were kept white. For so long, being a detective, being a superhero, was kept white, was kept the dominant majority. That is the point. When they tell you that people will react to this because they're attached to their old characters and they don't want to see them change, they don't want to see them be not white, that is opposition's point. You should question the mindset that you have that these characters are intrinsically tied to their whiteness, that these characters are intrinsically tied to being a dominant majority. Don't you want to see them look like the rest of the world? Our second theme in this debate is, admittedly, as Proposition says, the little bit less important theme of just like straight up numbers, but I do want to touch on it a little bit. Remakes are inevitable. Remakes are coming right now. It's super hard to develop new original characters. That means it's so much easier to get representation through remakes. If remakes are going to happen in either world, I'd rather those remakes be ones that change the ethnicity or change the dominant tropes of those characters. Given that that's the case, we've given you lots of mechanisms, including profit incentive, and just what's more likely for movie studios to do, that show that remakes would have the biggest cultural impact on society. Which means even if you're a little confused on like which representation you might think would be better, if there are reasons for the profit, if there are reasons for the op, just know that we have a significantly larger amount of it on our side of the house, because remakes are just so much easier and so much better for the corrupt studios that they think that they are going to convince on their side of this house. But at the end of the day, think of how entrenched these cultural icons are in society. Think of what they mean to little kids who don't understand the socio-political implications of all the critical theory that Proposition brings. Shouldn't they just be brown? Oh, what pen? I did not see it. Sorry. One second. Did you grab it?
It's alright, thank you so much. It's alright.
Sorry, do you need an extra pen?
You just want
That's right, yeah, maybe we can just figure it out.
Sorry.
You're all good. Now I call the reply speaker for the opposition.
Proposition 3 made it very clear why you should vote for opposition in today's debate. They told you that racist people are going to see Black Superman and write it off as a cheap ripoff. Fine. I don't really care what the racist person thinks if it's a cheap ripoff. What I care is that the children of color see Black Superman independent of whether or not the quality is good. It's the fact that they see their cultural icons, that all the other kids in the classroom talk about every day, look like them. When kids walk in with Superman lunchboxes every single day, they think they too can be Superman. The debate is really that simple. 2 questions then to evaluate the round. Which side is best for minority representation? And if that doesn't seal the deal, what pushes people to be more equitable in the future if they aren't a minority? First question, what is best for minority representation? What is the analysis you heard from proposition in this debate? The best material is that you get more nuanced films which tell more empowering stories, more deep stories which give the real idea of what it's like to be a minority. They never answered 3 crucial things. 1, why, if the white executive board exists on both sides of the House, is it likely to be any more nuanced on their side? If anything, in a predominantly minority movie, in order to appeal to the predominantly white executive board, they have to do things like tokenization that wouldn't exist on our side of the House. Secondly, nuanced culture isn't what people want to see on the movie. What they want is normalcy. People in their own communities are always exposed to their own stories, exposed to their own culture. Rather, what they want to see is just someone that looks like them go through the American dream, or fall in love, or feel and experience loss. Average things, as opposed to having minority movies which are exclusively about the fact that they are a minority. Thirdly, we told you that the quality of film stays very good, because movie studios have the vested interest in still making money. Like untold you in Proposition 1, that profit incentive still exists. Moreover, they never explained why they wouldn't be any more cheap on their side of the House, considering it's the same executive boards. But untold you in Proposition 1 that the depth of character already exists. That 3D version of Ariel and all her nuance already exists. So even if the movie is cheaper, they don't have to spend time making the storyline better. Why then is normalcy the most important thing in this round? First, it allows them to escape from their problems. Sure, proposition, minorities do have to spend more time being careful walking around the street, but they don't want to think about that every time they go to the movies. Rather, they want an escape from that oppression when they go to the movies. That's what normalcy achieves. Secondly, it's the only way to be engaged in the social fabric because these are iconic movies. It allows you to be a normal person with normal experiences, but it also allows you to be the superhero. Instead of you could be like James Bond, you become him. What then, second question, pushes people to be more equitable in the future? Let's say you think representation is a wash, you have no idea what's going on. This then is how you evaluate the round. On their side of the House, people see Black Panther, and if you're racist, you just push it aside as the black movie. But on our side of the House, white mothers and white fathers have to explain to their child why they can't go see The Little Mermaid because Ariel is now black. When the child continues to insist they want to see it, they have one of 2 options. Either they confront the fact that they're racist and they question it themselves, or their child goes and sees it and they grow up in a world in which Ariel can be black, even if their parents are racist. We win in the long term.
Now, to close this debate, I call the reply speaker for the proposition.
The strategic issue with their case is that they really weren't debating the motion at hand. Let's just analyze the benefits and explain why they weren't. And second of all, let's weigh up the 2 worlds and show why we still win. Firstly, the strategic issue. The goals in this debate were so different on both sides. Our side supported creating more representation of minority issues. Their side supported just having more minority representation as in just having more minority actors in inside media, in remakes, that was sufficient in their case to win, according to them. Why is that simply not enough? Because what they basically are supporting is a motion to have more minority actors in big roles. There's no explanation of why it's exclusive, that you must have cultural icons, and even then they only have one thing. They're iconic, and that makes them better. So let's weigh that then. Let's weigh whether or not the iconic matters, and whether or not this creates better outcomes for society. The rest of their arguments, the idea about quotas, their arguments about 3D characterizations, all they simply prove is that you just have more minority actors, or minority actors access better scripts. Neither of those are exclusive to this motion. We don't think these matter. Let's weigh whether or not iconic characters matter. 3 issues. Firstly, discourse. We told you why. When you're trying to have a delicate balancing act between the rights of an actor versus the representation of issues, you don't balance it. You told you why people will simply get mad at films because they simply think they're an inferior Bond movie. They get distracted from whether representation was done well. All they get focused on is on this notion of whether or not this movie compared to the previous one. We told you why discourse is worse because you enable trolling and so much other vitriol. Responses to that, the only thing they said is that, look, it doesn't matter because at least we have conversations started and sparked with the majority. Look, even if the majority does not change their mind, the question remains, who helps minority communities feel more represented therefore? And I think it's very clear, at least if we have a film where you have a character that's relatable to the minority, doesn't matter the minority doesn't change their mind, at least ours is better. Why is ours better? Second idea, role models. This is about the future. The future is now. It's not about the past characters. They may have grown up with Superman, but we're talking about whether or not we're going to create new superheroes for the people. Whether or not we're going to create Black Panther, not just create another Black Superman. You don't have to retreat to cultural stereotypes of the past. We are moving onwards. That was what we told you when we told you we wanted to create a tapestry of new characters, not simply rehash and repeat. We don't think icons therefore matter because it's more empowering to feel and relate to Black Panther than can ever be powerful to relate to Black Superman. Lastly, are our stories going to be better? Empirically so. Why? They try to strawman our arguments as in because we somehow said that there's racist directors, it means that all our movies, because they're made of and all scriptwriters are bad. That's not our argument. Our argument is that when you try to put a Black character into a white character's role, you restrict creative freedoms. You restrict the capacity of writers to escape the bounds that are defining the character in the first place. Meaning that you deprive them of a capacity to actually try and change things. So when they have this ludicrous idea, why not just make Superman fight police? It doesn't happen because you can't. You can't simply just change the baselines of everything, right? That's the reason why, that's our argument that we gave you. We told you, on the contrary, that you can make a new character. Black Panther can fight the police because you're making a new character, writing new storylines. It's not the same on their side of the house. They can't simply say they have our benefits because racism exists on both sides. We understand that it does, but it's whether or not you can restrict creative freedoms that is the issue at hand. Understand also how disgusting it is when they say we just want minorities to do normal things. But the normal things are the normal things that our white people do in their white roles, in their white characters. That's normal. I mean, that's disgusting. You don't want them to do normal things. You want to do new things, individual things that define themselves as a people. We don't think it's fair when they try to insist that they have a better world on our side. Understand this. We want the children of the future to grow up living and dreaming of Wakanda, not Metropolis. We don't want them to live in the past. We want them to live in the future. We think it's so much more powerful on our side of the house. We empower them so much more. I'm so proud to propose.
Thank you very much for the section of the round. We'll give you the results very quickly. Good job. To around 5 minutes. So let's do this. Okay. First of all, I would like to congratulate both teams. So let's have a small round of applause for both. This was a particularly strong round, and all 3 judges really enjoyed watching this debate. So, the results. We reached a close but unanimous score. We gave this debate to the opposition. Alright, so in terms as to how we reached this decision, I think all judges broadly agree that the main criteria that both teams set for this debate was firstly, whether the representation of these films would be adequate, and secondly, whether the existence of these films would foster more social change and more and a greater degree of acceptance for minorities. So felt that in terms of the representation clash, there were two basic subpoints. First, the initial phase of the round was dominated by the contention based on the characterization of the proposition around why it was very likely that movies that try to recast were going to be based on cheap stereotypes and facile ways of trying to make the characteristics of minorities feel into these types of the stories. Why? Because of the structural incentives that the film industry has. So the contention from the opposition, which we felt was strategically very powerful, was to mention that the potential harms in terms of the decision process that the film industry would actually make was symmetrical. Why? Because if both sides broadly accepted that the people who run those industries was largely not representative, and that they were largely moved by things like money instead of trying to capture the nuances of the lived experiences of these minorities, then it is plausible that those facile stories would happen on both sides. But furthermore, we felt that there were two contributions from the opposition that not only proved that this was a wash, but that we could see active harms if we took the stance from the proposition. Firstly, that it would be the case that if they tried to start these stories from scratch, it was more likely that to try to differentiate these characters, they would be even more of a caricature, EFL Pride hashtag, because of the following reason. That they were trying to distinguish the characters based on this specific trait, which means that they were likely to be even less sophisticated. Then secondly, the fact that they are recasted means that it is plausible that they are going to be structured based on a character that's already relatively nuanced. So if we buy the characterization of the proposition that's, say, very negative of the process of decision from the film industry, it is likely that their world is actually worse. Then the second clash within the representation subpoint was about whether the portrayal of minorities as sharing the stories of these largely mainstream characters would actually be what minorities want to see themselves as portrayed or not. What we heard from the proposition was that firstly, it was unlikely that the structure of these stories could actually be adapted so that they would capture the complexities of the life of minorities. And then secondly, that they actually do not want to be subjected under the prejudice of what normality actually is, and they want to actually see new and different stories that tell their lived experiences. We felt that the opposition was able to counter this by firstly mentioning that it is actually not clear that what minorities want is to entirely distinguish themselves, because there is a number of cultural icons that are particularly powerful and that say, we felt that particularly stylistically, the opposition had the capability of trying to illustrate things like a strong choice of words, to try to portray that, especially in the experiences of a child, it was likely that they desired to feel that they were normal and that they could belong within the mainstream society, and it was not clear why the counter-narrative of the proposition, based on it is more likely that they would like to distinguish themselves, was true in a significant number of possible scenarios. Then we felt that the third point of chat here, the second broad clash here, was based on the acceptance that they would get from society. The key clash from the proposition was based on that we would see a significant backlash that comes from old fans of these stories, saying that they are trying to delegitimize the character of these stories that already have a set number of traits. We felt that, one, it was not clear why this backlash would be so significant as to cause a significant harm to minorities. I think that, firstly, if we buy the first characterization from the opposition, that this is actually how minorities would like to see themselves, it is not clear why this benefit is beaten by the fact that there is a degree of backlash from people who are likely already very bigoted. But then secondly, we heard the comeback from the opposition, which was based on it is not clear why the fact that these movies already have a established legacy, which means that they are likely to be even more exposed, which means that it is also likely that we're going to see more of these movies because of the incentives to make a significant number of things like remakes and things like saturating the market of films with films based on the experiences of minorities. Given that, it is not clear why the increased exposure is necessarily outweighed by the fact that there is a limited number of backlash from a group of particular individuals who are already extremely bigoted. So given that it was not clear why this was a net harm when balanced by the increased exposure, because we also felt that the practical clash fell for the opposition. Overall, what we felt is that the key way in which the opposition was able to outweigh the characterization of the proposition was by attacking the key link that it is not clear that trying to portray minorities as necessarily different is what they want for themselves, and secondly, that given the incentives of how the industry works, means that the desire of having new and nuanced stories was more likely to happen under their world. Okay, so this is briefly how we reached this goal, and I wish both teams the best of luck in further rounds. Thank you very much.